If you have type 2 diabetes or you're struggling with high blood sugar, then today's video may completely change the way you think about one of the most common drinks in your kitchen. Most diabetics focus on avoiding sugar, cutting carbs, and taking medications. But very few realize that the type of milk they drink every day may have a surprising impact on their blood sugar, insulin response, cravings, and overall metabolic health. In today's video, we'll reveal the milk that many health experts believe can be a smarter choice for blood sugar control, discuss the science behind its benefits, and explain how it may support a healthier lifestyle for people with type 2 diabetes. Be sure to watch until the end, because we'll also uncover several common milk mistakes that could be causing your blood sugar to rise without you even knowing it. I need you to stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to know which milk hurts blood sugar, which milk only pretends to help, and which one I would choose if I wanted the strongest everyday advantage. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel and join our community for clear, life-saving health guidance made for you. Now here's the truth almost nobody says clearly enough. No milk on earth can magically cure type 2 diabetes by itself. If someone promises you that one drink alone can erase years of insulin resistance, they are not protecting you. But there is one kind of milk that can fit beautifully into a blood sugar-friendly routine, support better habits, and help move some people toward the kind of weight loss and metabolic improvement that makes remission possible. And that word matters, a remission. Not miracle, not overnight reversal, not throw your medicine away by Friday nonsense. Remission. That means blood sugar returning to a non-diabetic range and staying there for a meaningful period without diabetes medication. That is a very different claim. And it matters because type 2 diabetes is not some little sugar problem floating in isolation. It is a disease tied to insulin resistance, excess body fat in the wrong places, impaired pancreatic function, inflammation, and daily habits that repeat themselves meal after meal. So when people ask me, "Doctor, what milk should I drink to reverse this?" what they're really asking is, what choice can help me stop making things worse and start making things better? And that is exactly the question we're going to answer today. Because I've watched this happen again and again, especially with seniors, someone gives up soda, and that's wonderful, but then they replace it with a sweetened oat milk latte every morning. Or they stop eating dessert, but they start drinking 2 large glasses of flavored milk at night because they think liquid calories don't count the same way. Then they look at their glucose numbers and feel betrayed. They say, "I don't understand, I'm trying." And I believe them because they are trying. The problem isn't always effort. The problem is often hidden sugar, hidden starch, hidden calories, and the dangerous myth that all milks are gentle on blood sugar. They are not. Some are quiet saboteurs, some are neutral, and one, if used correctly, can be genuinely helpful. Before I reveal the milk I would put at the top of the list, I need to show you why the others can be such a trap. Because if you don't understand the trap, you won't understand the power of the right choice. Here's the first thing most people miss. Liquids are sneaky. They go down fast. They don't fill you up the way solid food does, and they can deliver sugar or starch with very little resistance from your appetite. That means a breakfast that feels innocent can become a blood sugar ambush. A bowl of cereal, a banana, and a big glass of the wrong milk can load your body with a surprising amount of carbohydrate before 8 a.m. And once you start the day with that rise, many people chase energy all day, then blame their diabetes instead of the morning routine. Now let's talk about one of the most overpraised options in grocery stores, oat milk. I know it has a health halo. I know it sounds earthy and clean and modern. I know people hear oats and imagine fiber, heart health, and stable glucose. But the reality is that oat milk can carry more carbohydrate than many people realize, and some versions contain added sugars on top of that. Even when it isn't sweetened, it can still be more carb heavy than better options. So if you are pouring it freely into coffee, cereal, smoothies, and protein shakes because you think it's automatically diabetic friendly, you may be creating a daily blood sugar climb without noticing it. For some people, oat milk is not a disaster. But for many, it is not the smart default they believe it is. Rice milk is even more deceptive because it often looks light and harmless. But metabolically, it can be one of the weakest choices for glucose control. Rice-based drinks tend to be higher in carbohydrate and lower in protein. And that combination is exactly what many people with type 2 diabetes do not need. If you think about what helps blunt a sugar rise, protein can help, fiber can help, healthy fats can help. But a drink that leans more toward easy carbohydrate and gives you very little protein support is not doing your pancreas any favors. So if you have been drinking rice milk because it sounds gentle, or because someone told you dairy-free automatically means healthier, I need you to pause. Dairy-free is not the same thing as blood sugar friendly. Those are two very different questions. Now let's move to almond milk, because this one is tricky. Unsweetened almond milk can actually be a decent option from a blood sugar standpoint because it is often low in carbohydrate and low in sugar. That sounds wonderful, and in one sense it is, but here's the catch. Traditional almond milk is usually very low in protein, so while it may avoid a big glucose hit, it often doesn't give you much staying power. And staying power matters. If your breakfast drink is low in carbs, but also low in protein, you may still feel hungry fast. And that hunger can drive snacking, grazing, and a second breakfast you didn't plan on eating. So almond milk is not a villain if it's unsweetened, but it also isn't the strongest all-around choice for most people trying to stabilize appetite, glucose, and weight at the same time. Then we have the flavored plant milks, the vanilla versions, the chocolate versions, the barista blend versions that taste almost like dessert. This is where labels become dangerous theater because people see almond, soy, coconut, or oat on the front and never look at the added sugars hiding on the back. That is a huge mistake. Health professionals consistently warn people with diabetes to choose unsweetened versions of plant-based milks for a reason. Those flavored versions can pack enough added sugar and total carbohydrate to make blood glucose control much harder. So if you are saying, "But doctor, I only drink plant milk," I need you to hear me clearly. Plant-based does not protect you from sugar. The label that matters most is not the marketing on the front. It's the carbohydrate and added sugar line on the nutrition panel. Let's talk about regular dairy milk, because some people swing too far in the other direction and start fearing it unnecessarily. Plain white dairy milk does contain sugar, but that sugar is mostly lactose, the naturally occurring sugar in milk, not added sugar. That distinction matters. A cup of cow's milk also gives you meaningful protein, which helps make it more balanced than many sugary beverages. But balance does not mean unlimited. Milk and yogurt still affect blood glucose because they still contain carbohydrate. And this is where many people get sloppy. They stop respecting portions because they're drinking something traditional. They pour huge glasses. They drink it with carb-heavy meals. They use it in smoothies with fruit, honey, and oats. Then they wonder why their numbers rise. So plain milk is not poison, but it is not automatically protective either. And there is another trap, one that catches people who think they found a clever loophole: lactose-free milk. Many people assume lactose-free means sugar-free, and that is simply not true. The lactose is broken down, not erased. That means it can still influence blood glucose, and in some cases, it even tastes sweeter because those milk sugars have been split into simpler forms. So if you switch to lactose-free milk, believing it would be a free pass for your diabetes, I don't want you panicking, but I do want you waking up. Lactose-free can be helpful for digestion. It is not a magic blood sugar hack. And once again, that's the deeper lesson in this whole conversation. Your metabolism doesn't care about trendy assumptions. It responds to the actual carbohydrate load, the actual protein content, the actual added sugars, and the actual portion you drink. So where does soy milk fit into this? Because this is where things start getting more interesting. Unsweetened soy milk is one of the strongest non-dairy options for people with type 2 diabetes. Why? Because nutritionally, it comes closer to dairy milk than most plant milks do, especially in protein. That matters more than people realize. Protein helps with satiety. Protein helps make a meal feel complete. And when a drink gives you decent protein without added sugar, it becomes much easier to build a breakfast or snack that doesn't leave you hungry an hour later. So if you cannot tolerate dairy, or you avoid it for personal reasons, unsweetened soy milk is a very respectable choice. In fact, if someone told me they were choosing between sweet oat milk, rice milk, and unsweetened soy, I would not hesitate. Soy wins that blood sugar battle almost every time. But even with soy, we have not arrived at the milk I want you to pay closest attention to. Because the milk I'm about to show you has one advantage that plain dairy milk does not, and one advantage most plant milks do not: fermentation. And fermentation changes the conversation. The milk I would place at the top of this list for many people with type 2 diabetes, assuming they tolerate dairy, is plain, unsweetened kefir. Not fruit-flavored kefir, not dessert kefir, not the one with a cheerful label and a sugar count that looks like a soft drink. Plain, unsweetened kefir. If you've never tried it, it tastes a bit like a drinkable yogurt with a tangy, sour edge. And I know some of you are already thinking, that doesn't sound delicious. Stay with me. Delicious is not the question. Helpful is the question. Here's why kefir deserves your attention, and why I'm not just throwing out another trendy wellness word. Kefir is a fermented milk drink, and fermentation matters because it creates a different nutritional and digestive experience than standard sweetened milk drinks. Kefir contains probiotics and beneficial microorganisms, and plain versions can deliver protein while keeping added sugar low. More importantly, there is actual clinical research that makes this conversation worth having. In a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial involving adults with type 2 diabetes, people who drank probiotic fermented milk had better fasting blood glucose results and better A1C outcomes than the comparison group over 8 weeks. Now, that does not mean kefir is a miracle. It does not mean every person will respond the same way. But it absolutely means this is more than hype. There is a real signal here worth respecting. And I want to slow down right here because this is where people usually make a serious mistake. They hear study and immediately inflate it into proof that diabetes is gone. No, that is not what the evidence shows. It was a relatively small study. It was not a forever study. And even the researchers noted limitations, including sample size and the lack of a no fermented milk control group. So if someone tries to sell you kefir as a guaranteed cure, they are stretching the truth past the breaking point. But if someone tells you that plain, unsweetened kefir may help support better glycemic control as part of a smarter eating pattern, that is a fairer, more responsible statement. This matters because the most dangerous health advice is not always completely false. Sometimes it starts with a real finding, then gets exaggerated into something reckless. Now let me tell you what makes kefir especially interesting in real life, not just on paper. It does two jobs at once when it's used well. First, it can replace worse drinks. And second, it can help make a meal more filling. That sounds simple, but simple is powerful. If a person swaps a sweet coffee drink, sweetened cereal milk, or dessert-like smoothie for plain kefir used intelligently, they can cut added sugar, increase protein quality, and make it easier to stay full. That can reduce snacking later. It can reduce the late morning crash. It can reduce the emotional, "I've been good all day, so now I deserve a treat" spiral that sabotages so many glucose plans. Often the best diabetes strategy is not adding one magical thing. It is replacing one harmful habit with one better habit that you can repeat every day without drama. There's also the appetite piece, and I don't think enough people understand how important that is. Blood sugar control is not just a chemistry problem. It is a behavior problem driven by hunger, routine, convenience, and cravings. If the drink you choose leaves you hungry, you will pay for that later. Maybe not in 10 minutes, maybe not in an hour, but later. And when later comes, it usually comes as toast, crackers, cookies, cereal, or a second helping you never planned. That is why low sugar alone is not enough. A drink has to fit into a pattern that supports satiety. Plain unsweetened kefir does that better than many sweeter milks because it brings protein, tang, and a little substance. Unsweetened soy milk can also play that role, but sweet, low-protein milks often fail here, and that failure echoes through the rest of the day. Now, I need to warn you about a mistake that completely destroys the benefit, and almost everyone makes it the first time. They buy plain kefir. Then they panic at the taste. Then they dump in honey, syrup, sweet granola, or a big pile of fruit to make it easier. And in that moment, they quietly turn a strategic blood sugar tool into a disguised dessert. If you want the benefit, you have to respect the format. Plain means plain. Unsweetened means unsweetened. If you need to ease into it, fine. Use a smaller amount. Pair it with chia seeds. Blend it with a few berries rather than a mountain of fruit. Use it in a high-protein breakfast instead of drinking a huge glass by itself. But do not rescue the taste by flooding it with sugar and then tell yourself it's still a diabetes drink. That's how good intentions become bad numbers. And let me say something else that could save people a lot of frustration, especially if they try kefir or soy milk for 1 week and expect fireworks. The first win may not be dramatic glucose collapse. The first win may be quieter. You may notice you're less hungry in the afternoon. You may notice you stop craving something sweet after breakfast. You may notice your evening snack gets smaller without force. Those things matter. In fact, they matter enormously. Because sustainable blood sugar improvement often comes from repeating small decisions that reduce total calorie intake, reduce added sugar, and make weight loss more achievable. That is exactly why I get nervous when people hunt for a single superfood but ignore the pattern around it. The right milk helps, but it helps most when it is woven into a larger system of better choices, rather than worshipped as a cure. And if we are going to use the phrase reverse type 2 diabetes, then we have to be honest about what actually drives that outcome. The strongest evidence points towards significant and sustained weight loss as a major factor in achieving remission for some people, especially earlier in the disease course. And that is the uncomfortable truth. Not cinnamon by itself, not apple cider vinegar by itself, not a miracle tea, not one special milk. Significant, sustained metabolic improvement, often through calorie reduction, better food quality, better activity, and in some cases, more intensive interventions. Research highlighted by national diabetes experts has shown that losing around 10 kilograms, about 22 pounds, can make remission much more likely for some people. So when I recommend kefir or unsweetened soy, I am not saying drink this and forget the rest. I am saying choose the milk that makes the rest easier to accomplish. This is where the psychology becomes so important because the wrong milk often keeps people trapped in denial. They think, I'm not drinking soda, so I'm fine. But their morning latte is loaded. Their cereal bowl is loaded. Their smoothie is loaded. Their nighttime cocoa is loaded. And because none of it looks like junk food, they never identify the source of the problem. That's why I want you to think of milk as a metabolic messenger. It sends your body a message. Some milks say, here's sugar and starch without much help. Some say, here's a little protein, but watch the portion. And plain unsweetened kefir, used correctly, says, here's a more balanced option that may support glucose control while helping you stay fuller. Once you start thinking that way, grocery shopping changes, breakfast changes, coffee changes, even dessert changes. Now let's talk about timing, because how you drink the milk matters almost as much as which milk you choose. If you drink a large amount of even a better milk alongside a high carbohydrate meal, you can still create a bigger glucose rise than you expected. This is why context matters. Pouring the right milk over sugar-heavy cereal and calling it healthy is not strategy. It's wishful thinking. A better approach is pairing plain, unsweetened kefir with foods that reinforce stability, like a protein-rich breakfast, a modest portion of berries, seeds, or a balanced lunch. The milk should support the meal, not rescue a bad one. And if you use unsweetened soy milk, the same rule applies. It works best inside a smart structure. Nothing in diabetes care works well when it is placed on top of chaos. Even good tools fail in bad systems. I also want to address the seniors watching this, because blood sugar is not your only concern. Heart health matters. Blood pressure matters. Bone health matters. Muscle preservation matters. Appetite changes with age. Hydration changes with age. That means the best milk is not simply the one with the lowest sugar. It is the one that fits your total health picture. For some people, plain low-sugar dairy can contribute protein and calcium. For others, an unsweetened fortified soy milk may be a better fit. And for many who tolerate it well, plain unsweetened kefir offers a particularly attractive combination of protein, fermentation, and low added sugar. But please hear me on this point. The best diabetic choice is never just about one lab number. It is about the whole person, the whole routine, and whether the habit can actually survive real life. Some of you are wondering, how much should I drink? And this is where I want to keep you away from extremes. One study used roughly 20 ounces a day of kefir, but that does not mean everyone needs to start there. More is not automatically better. In fact, for some people, especially those not used to fermented foods, jumping in too fast can lead to bloating or gas. That does not mean the idea is wrong. It means the body sometimes needs a gentler entry. Start with a modest portion. See how you feel. See how your glucose responds. See whether it actually helps your appetite or whether you end up adding so much sweetener that the benefit disappears. That is the grown-up way to do nutrition. Not blind faith, observation, adjustment, repetition. The right help habit is the one that improves your numbers without making your life miserable. And please do not make the most dangerous mistake of all, which is using a better milk as an excuse to ignore your medication plan. If you are on diabetes medication, especially insulin or drugs that can lower blood sugar significantly, any meaningful improvement in diet should be watched carefully with your clinician. Better choices can help. They can lower readings, they can support weight loss, but medication changes should be guided, not improvised. I never want someone hearing a video like this, seeing one nice fasting number, and deciding they are cured. That is how people get hurt. Smart nutrition and smart medical care are partners. They are not enemies. In fact, the most successful diabetes stories usually come from people who stop treating food and medicine like opposing teams and start using both intelligently, with measurements, patience, and honesty about what is actually happening. Now let's go deeper into why sweetened kefir fails, because this is where a lot of hopeful people get tricked. Kefir on the label does not guarantee a blood sugar-friendly product. Some flavored versions are loaded with added sugars that can wipe out the advantage you were looking for in the first place. And the same thing happens with yogurt drinks marketed as gut health products. They sound medicinal, they look innocent, but nutritionally, some behave more like dessert than support. So when you shop, do not fall in love with buzzwords: fermented, probiotic, natural, ancient. None of those words tell you the full story. Turn the container around. Read the total carbohydrates. Read the added sugars. Read the protein. That little moment of discipline in the grocery aisle can spare you weeks of confusion at home. Your glucose meter will not reward your intentions. It will respond to what you actually bought. If you cannot tolerate dairy at all, I do not want you feeling left out of this conversation. Because while plain unsweetened kefir would be my top choice for many people who can handle dairy, unsweetened soy milk remains an excellent backup strategy. It offers better protein than most plant-based alternatives, and that protein advantage matters. It helps soy milk act less like a sugary beverage and more like a functional part of a meal. Compare that with rice milk or many sweetened oat milks, which can deliver more carbohydrate without enough protein to slow the ride. So no, soy milk is not second class. For dairy-free viewers, it may be your best practical choice. The real principle is this: choose unsweetened, choose higher protein when possible, and stop assuming the healthiest looking carton is the healthiest option for your metabolism. Those assumptions are expensive. I want to speak to the people who are exhausted, the ones who have tried so many diabetic tips that they no longer trust anything. I understand that fatigue. I really do. When every week brings a new must-have superfood, you start protecting yourself by believing none of it matters. But that can become its own trap, because sometimes a simple choice really does matter. not because it is magical, but because it sits at a point of repetition. Milk is not something you have once a month. Many people use it every day, sometimes several times a day. That means even a modest improvement compounds. A better milk at breakfast, a better milk in coffee, a better milk in a smoothie, a better milk instead of dessert. Suddenly, one decision repeats itself across the week, and the math of your health quietly changes in your favor. That is powerful. And this is exactly why I dislike sensational titles that promise instant reversal, even when they point in a partly helpful direction, because they train people to think in single events instead of systems. One drink, one pill, one detox, one trick. But metabolic disease does not usually appear in one event, and it rarely leaves in one event either. It changes through patterns: repeated sleep, repeated movement, repeated meals, repeated portions, repeated choices in the refrigerator aisle. So the right milk matters because it belongs to a pattern. It is not the whole pattern. And paradoxically, the moment you stop demanding a miracle from one food is often the moment that food becomes genuinely useful. Plain unsweetened kefir is not a savior. It is a very strong supporting player, and good support, repeated long enough, can transform outcomes more than dramatic promises ever will. Let me show you what the wrong pattern looks like, because I want this to become visual in your mind. Morning, sweet coffee drink with flavored oat milk. Midday, granola parfait with sweet yogurt. Evening, healthy smoothie with banana, honey, and vanilla almond milk. Night, a glass of milk with cookies because it feels harmless. That person may honestly believe they are doing better than before, especially if they cut out soda. But the total carbohydrate exposure, the liquid calories, and the appetite rebound can still keep glucose elevated and weight moving the wrong direction. Now compare that with a more strategic pattern. Eggs or Greek yogurt, maybe a small serving of plain unsweetened kefir, berries in moderation, vegetables at meals, protein distributed through the day, water as the default beverage, and only unsweetened, higher protein milk choices when milk is used. That is not flashy, but it is metabolically smarter. A milk choice that lowers your urge to snack can help your A1C indirectly. A milk choice that trims added sugar can help your weight indirectly. A milk choice that gives you protein without a huge carb load can help your breakfast work harder for you. This is why I want you to stop thinking in one-step equations. It is not kefir equals reversal. It is the right milk can support the biological and behavioral conditions that make improvement more likely. That is less dramatic, yes, but it is more honest. And honesty is what actually helps people heal. Take care of yourself, stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next video.